And how my relationship all changed. Now, I never felt in my life that I wasn't loved, and I never felt that I was deprived of anything. I was a happy child. I mean, here was LuElla. I mean, she was Alma's daughter, and they just took me in as one of their own. And it was fun. And it was fun with the cousins. But this all changed when my grandfather died. When my grandfather died, my Aunt Eileen and my Aunt Della, they come down for their father's funeral. And my grandfather had a half-sister, and her name was Fern Baker Ballantyne. And she was married to John Ballantyne, who was treasurer of the Philco Radio Company at that time. He went on to become the chairman of the board of Philco Corporation, which was a very large corporation in the United States. And in the 40s, he played a very active part in the war record. And we just had many, many things and opportunities given to us that wouldn't be available to the normal household. Like I seen television when in the 40s. I would come back to Aunt Della and I'd tell her about that. They said, "Oh, you made that up." But I didn't. But anyway, getting back to my grandfather's death, when we knew Aunt Fern only in a letter. She wrote letters to us, and we knew that Grandpa had this half-sister that lived in Philadelphia, and we only knew her through letters. And when the phone call was made that her half-brother had died, she got on a plane and she flew to St. Louis. And they went over and got her, and this was our first really acquaintance with Aunt Fern. And she was just lovely to all of us. Of course, we were poor as church mouses, but I didn't know it. And we didn't really have a lot, but most of the time, my uncles were out of work because the mine struck a lot and was down. And of course, you know, Uncle Donald had 4 children. Uncle Bud had 4 kids. It was a large family. And so anyway, when she seen the circumstances here, she took it upon herself to help us. And of course, she had compassion for my mother for the fact that she was left, you know, a widow at a young age of 25, no formal education, no ways to make a living other than, you know, work as a chambermaid in a hotel or something like this. Her options were almost nil. And so anyway, Aunt Eileen and Uncle Glenn were living in a 2-room apartment. And I can remember this apartment because Aunt Eileen used to take me there, and she wouldn't allow me to get on her bed because she had embroidered a bedspread. Now I'm telling you, these people had nothing, and they had to make do with whatever they had. And she had embroidered this bedspread, and it also had this large piece of material that laid over the pillows, and it had all fancy flowers on it, you know. Well, you didn't dare lay your head on it. It was simply for looks. And Aunt Eileen loved flowers. And outside of her kitchen, she planted snow on the mountains. And
what's that?
Well, it's a green plant, grows about this high, and it has white on it, so it's snow on the Green Mountain. And I never see it today. Every time I see it, no matter where I am, I think of Aunt Eileen. Well, anyway, she saw the situation, and Aunt Fern decided how she could help her brother or her half-brother's family. And so she talked to Aunt Eileen and Uncle Glenn. Now, they had no work. Uncle Glenn was working in the CCC camp. This was a thing, a work group that was made possible through President Roosevelt. They went around the CCC and they built, I think they built libraries, and they built swimming pools and all the building projects.
So this was during the Depression?
Yes, it was. And so anyway, Uncle Glenn worked at CCC camp. His future was, not very good. And so she talked Aunt Eileen and Uncle Glenn in returning to Pennsylvania with her. And she said, if nothing else, she said, you could be a guardian, more or less, or Uncle Glenn could be like a chauffeur, and you could be like a nanny and help take care of people's children. And it's very, lucrative. A lot of money is involved here. And so anyway, she took Aunt Eileen and Uncle Glenn back to Philadelphia. And of course, they didn't live in Philadelphia. They lived in a suburb, and it was called Abington, Pennsylvania. And I can remember her phone number to this day. It's Ogons 2388. Because I lived there. I was so fascinated because we didn't have telephone in Aunt Della's. We didn't have a telephone. And Aunt Fern had this telephone. I thought it was great. And the number was Ogons 2388. And isn't it funny? You remember these things the rest of your life. But anyway, they returned, and there was many letters written, and they wanted my grandmother to establish herself out east. Well, she just wouldn't do it. She said she could never be happy away from West Frankfort and away, and so she persuaded my mother to come east to take care of her mother. And so my mother did this, and of course I was about 7 years old, and we made this trip. We got on the train at Effingham, and we made the trip to Pennsylvania Station.